One of the hardest things you could ever go through being a fan of the game of basketball is your team hitting that reset button and beginning their rebuilding process, especially if you're a fan of a team that's been able to string together consecutive seasons of getting to the postseason. They've been able to keep a certain group of guys together that's been able to play at a high level. When it's time for all of that to come to an end, it can be very hard as a fan. And of course, we know it's very hard on the organization, but from a fan's perspective, I think what makes it so frightening is just that once your team starts that rebuilding process, you're just faced with so much uncertainty, because we've seen it throughout NBA history. Every team's rebuilding process doesn't last the same amount of time. Some teams rebuild a lot quicker than other teams. Some teams take a bunch of years to rebuild. So you have that uncertainty there, and then also you have that uncertainty of your franchise drafting the correct players, missing out on players, paying the right people as far as coaches and free agents. So there's so much uncertainty that comes with the rebuilding process. And then also just those first couple of years when you're drafting new players, when you're hiring, testing out new coaches, and you're looking for new general managers, basically finding the right guys for the job. Those first couple of years could be so gruesome in the fashion that your team is losing games, especially when on those nights when it's basically G League night. You look at the starting lineup and you look out there and you see a bunch of guys that you've never heard of before, unless you do follow the G League. So that rebuilding process, it gets very dark sometimes. And one team that's done a terrific job with their rebuilding process is the Houston Rockets. We look at what they've been able to do since the year 2020, and in 2020, that's when the James Harden relationship came to an end with the Houston Rockets. And just to briefly sum it up, James Harden, he did not become just one of the best players in Houston Rockets history during his tenure with the Houston Rockets, but he became one of the best players in NBA history, and he gave that franchise so many historic moments and so many memories. I know for a fact when it was time for fans to let that go and the organization to let that go, it was very, very tough. But since then, the Houston Rockets, Ron and his staff, they've done a great job of rebuilding this franchise, and they've been rebuilding it in every single facet, through the coaching staff, through free agency, through the NBA draft, through trades. They've been doing a terrific job. And when I look at the Houston Rockets and I look at their journey, now their first 2 years, after trading James Harden, it was very rough, and we talked about that. That's expected, those first couple of years during that rebuilding process. And we seen the Houston Rockets, they were able to go out and basically they made all the correct choices. By the third time around, they've already drafted a bunch of talented players that you guys know of. They're still on most of them are still on the team right now. They went out and got some terrific free agents. Fred VanVleet, Dylan Brooks have been big time in expediting the process of the rebuild for the Houston Rockets. And then also they got a great leader at the helm and Coach Ime Udoka. So in the third year was really momentum for this rebuild for the Houston Rockets, and they came out and they showed that they were one of the better teams in the Western Conference. Last year it was just a bunch of health obstacles that the Houston Rockets had to overcome last season, and I think that was the biggest reason that they weren't able to get into postseason competition. And we get to this fourth year. The fourth year, I think we can say this rebuilding process is over for the Houston Rockets. I think they become an elite team in the NBA once again. They become an elite team in the Western Conference once again, and we're 21 games into the season, and I think the Houston Rockets, I think they played enough meaningful basketball to prove that they are one of those elite teams once again, because they are doing things that elite teams do in the regular season. And I know the word elite is not a word to be thrown around lightly when it comes to the game of basketball. When we look at the Houston Rockets, I think it's very hard not to associate them with this word. 21 games into the season, they have a record of 15-6. They've won 8 out of their last 10 ball games, and they're sitting at second place in a very, very stacked Western Conference, only behind the Oklahoma City Thunder. They both have the same amount of wins, but the Houston Rockets just have one more loss, and in their season series they played 2 games so far, so they're 1-1 against each other in the season. So for right now, the Oklahoma City Thunder, they get to keep their number 1 spot in the Western Conference. But we look at the Houston Rockets, we look at all the things they've been able to do so far this season. They're elite in a few different categories. They've been elite with the way that they've been playing on the defensive side of the ball. They've been top 3 in defensive rating all year long. They rank number 2 in the league in defensive rating. They're an elite defensive team. They have great individual wing defenders all over the place. And Coach Ime Udoka, he knows how to put together the right game plan for whatever team he's facing on any given night. So they're elite at playing defense, and to go along with their elite defense after getting a stop, they're also elite at rebounding the basketball. Number 1 in the NBA in total rebounds per game, and they're also number 1 in offensive rebounds per game. And that's because they don't just rebound at the center position. They have one of the best rebounders in the NBA with Alperen Sengun, but they rebound at every single position. Point guard, shooting guard, small forward, power forward, they're all crashing for rebounds. Jabari Smith Jr., Tari Eason, Amen Thompson, all of these guys are crashing along with Alperen Sengun. And then also the backup bigs on the team are really good rebounders as well, Jock Landale and Steven Adams. So they've been elite in these 2 categories all season long. And I think like the one question mark that that the Houston Rockets had from being stamped as that elite team, can they beat some of the other teams that are considered to be elite in the NBA? I think that was the final test for this team. And then lo and behold, we have the Houston Rockets playing at a very high level. They're second place in the Western Conference. They've been winning a lot more than they've been losing. Like we said, they're 8-10. They're 8-10 in their last 10 games, and they get this matchup against the Oklahoma City Thunder. Now, albeit I know the Oklahoma City Thunder, I know they're hemmed up right now health-wise, missing Chet Holmgren, missing Alex Caruso, and a few other vital pieces to the team. But with the guys that they still throw out there, the Oklahoma City Thunder, they're still one of the best teams in the NBA, and they're very, very hard to beat. They're a very deep roster, 1 through 15. They're very well coached, and just like the Houston Rockets, they have the ability to defend at a high level. And a lot of people might just point to this just being a regular season game, but this is so much more than a regular season game. These are 2 teams that has really been on the same trajectory since the year 2020. When we look at what both franchises did that year, the players that they lost, the players that they brought in, giving up on some of the best superstars in the NBA and moving towards youth. And then since that year 2020, both of these teams have been rebuilding their roster, becoming powerhouses in the Western Conference. So you have that going into this matchup. And then also just from the pure basketball standpoint, we have the number 1 seed in the Western Conference versus the number 2 seed in the Western Conference. So this is not no normal game. This is not just a regular season game. And if you watch that game, you could see the players, they didn't think it was just some regular season game as well. Both teams really wanted it really badly. They were playing really hard, making amazing plays, and we even had some hostility out there. So the game alone, just off those factors, this was really big time for the game of basketball. And the Oklahoma City Thunder and the Houston Rockets, both teams came out and they put on a show. But this was a big time win for the Houston Rockets, for those reasons we just listed. They have to prove that they could beat the elite teams in the NBA, because they're already beating the teams in the middle of the tier in the NBA. They're beating the weaker teams at the bottom of the NBA. Now you just have to prove that you can beat the better teams in the league, and they've been able to do that. They've also beaten the Dallas Mavericks while they had Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving in the lineup. So they have some meaningful wins against some of the better teams in the Western Conference this season. But when we look at what the Houston Rockets were able to do against the Oklahoma City Thunder in this big time win, As a team, they were able to dominate in two categories, like we talked about a few moments in the video. They were able to dominate on the boards like they've been doing all season long, winning the board count 51-46. They were also able to dominate at the free throw line, making 30 free throws to the Oklahoma City Thunder, 19 free throws. And when it came down to the three-point shots, both teams were evenly matched as both of these squads knocked down 13 threes apiece. And then we look to the actual game, what we were seeing from our eyes. I thought it was very entertaining from start to end. I thought we saw a lot of big time plays from the best players on both teams. And when you can have that happening, there's not much more you can ask of as a fan of the game of basketball. And the Houston Rockets, they were kind of in control of this game for majority of it. And then there was a moment where the Oklahoma City Thunder, they made a run, they got hot, and then they took control of the game. The Houston Rockets, their biggest lead was 11, and the Oklahoma City Thunder biggest lead was 8. So we have that, and then it was able to be a back and forth game down the stretch. What else could we ask for as fans of the game of basketball? But I just love what I was able to see from a lot of guys on the Houston Rockets, especially Alperen Sengun. I think he played a superb ball game. I think what he was able to do, it was big time, because when they went to him in the post in the Oklahoma City Thunder, whenever they double teamed him, he was able to quickly process it, make a quick decision, and that's why he finished this game with 9 assists. And whenever Alperen Sengun wasn't double teamed on that low block in the low post, whenever OKC decided not to double team him, he was able to go to work and get a bucket on who was ever guarding him down there. And this was a dominant performance by him. He finished the game with 20 points, 14 rebounds to go along with 9 assists. So 1 assist away for a triple-double for Alperen Sengun. Big time game, superstar performance from him. And then we look at the rest of the Houston Rockets. I think there's some other individual performances that deserve a lot of credit as well. We look at Fred VanVleet and Dillon Brooks. These were those two guys that we talked about. When it's time to rebuild and all that money is available, we got to make sure we spend it correctly. And I think the Houston Rockets, I think they've done a great job spending it on Fred VanVleet and Dillon Brooks, as we seen them step up in a win like this. And I'm putting so much emphasis on this win because this could build so much confidence, and this can really lay a bridge for something special for the Houston Rockets within this season. But they stepped up big time in this game. We look at Fred VanVleet, the game that he had, the most efficient game by him by far all season long, and the best game for him by far all season long. He finished with 38 points. He knocked down 13 out of 14 free throws, and he also knocked down 5 out of 9 3-pointers. So this was a big time game from him. He had some big time buckets in the fourth quarter. Same thing with Dillon Brooks, defending Shai Gilgeous-Alexander all game long. We know how tough of a task that is. He was able to pour in 16 points, while that being his defensive duty on the defensive side of the ball. So a big time performance by him, and he hit that timely shot at the end of the game when Alperen Sengun fell on the ground. That was a big time shot. Give some individual credit to Jabari Smith Jr. as well. I think he had a phenomenal game for the Houston Rockets. Just really tenacious, really energetic. He had 14 rebounds, 15 points, and he also had 3 blocks on the night. So we know how effective he can be in the ball game when we factor in everything: his ability to stretch the floor, his size, his versatility, his basketball IQ. He can guard multiple defenders. He can rebound. He just fits so perfectly for what the Houston Rockets want to do offensively and defensively. So this was a big time game against him, and he always rebounds the ball like this against the Oklahoma City Thunder. I don't know what it is. Go look at Jabari Smith Jr. versus OKC, and I only know this, and of course I research basketball a lot, but I was betting last night. I was looking at his game log against OKC, and the rebounds was crazy. But this was a big time performance by Jabari Smith Jr. So shout out to those guys, and then just shout out to the Houston Rockets as a group, because like we said, they're so well coached and they're so great on the defensive side of the ball. They're going to make it very, very tough for you to beat these guys. So the Houston Rockets, they look like a really great ball club. Jalen Green, who's one of the best scorers in the NBA, he only had 9 points. He only had 9 points this game, and of course you want more more from him, but I understand it. The Oklahoma City Thunder, there's some dogs on the defensive side of the ball as well, and their defense is designed to make players like Jalen Green struggle. So for his teammates to be able to step up and uplift him while he's struggling from the field, and then also him still being engaged, him still being vocal, him still being excited that his team is thriving while he's not playing the best. Boy, that's a great thing to see. So the Houston Rockets, they have something special going right now. And like we said, I said this last video, but to see where they've come from the year 2020, the first 2 years under Steven Silas to where they are right now, a lot of teams don't be able to go from that to where they are right now this quickly. So shout out to Robert Stone, shout out to Ime Udoka, and shout out to these players for putting in the work. But that's going to be it for today's video. If you guys enjoyed, please leave a like, comment down below. Do you think the Houston Rockets should be considered an elite team in the NBA right now? And then if you enjoyed this video, please subscribe for more weekly content. We do this all the time, man. And that's curtains.